Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for logging on to Zoom for this Licensing Committee meeting. My name is Constanza Bell, and I am the Council's Licensing Officer, and for the purpose of this meeting, I'm also the host. And what that means is I will be assisting the committee with the use of Zoom technology to manage the progress of this meeting. Before I turn to some matters of housekeeping, I'd just like to confirm firstly that everybody who's indicated that they're going to attend is now present in this room, and that I have locked the room, which means that nobody will be able to enter this room other than those who are already in it. If I receive an email indicating that somebody wishes to join, I can attend to that when it arises. So if we could move firstly, please, to introductions. I've introduced myself, but now if I could ask Councillor Green to please introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Councillor Green. I'm one of the councilmen on the committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. And now if I could ask the legal advisor to please introduce himself.
Good afternoon, my name is Leo Charalambides, Counsel, and I'm legal advisor to the Licensing Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Charalambides. And now, Ms. Clover, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Clover and I am counsel for Mr. Geezer, the applicant for the licence this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clover. And now Sergeant Boss, please, your introduction.
Good afternoon all. My name is Sergeant Boss. I'm the Police Licensing Officer.
And Mr. Williams, please.
Yes, good afternoon everyone. My name is Ben Williams. I'm here on behalf of the residents.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And Councillor Riley Smith, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Riley Smith. I'm also a councilman on the committee.
And finally, please, Councillor Brooke.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Brooke. I am a member of the committee.
Thank you very much for those introductions. If I could remind participants to please be on mute unless they're intending to speak. And if I could also remind participants that they will be able to make use of the raise your hand icon in order to indicate that they want to say something or that they have a point to raise. So if I could ask you to please do that if you have any concerns as the meeting progresses. There are a few points of housekeeping just to attend to before we commence. Firstly, I'd like to conduct a document check, and there are 4 documents that everybody should have. I'm going to display them so that we can ensure that everybody has them available. And if I could ask, please, that you ensure that you have either a paper copy or an electronic copy to hand, that will allow for the efficient progress of the meeting. So the first document I'd like to check that everybody has received is the document that is a very helpful note on the use of Zoom. Should now be displaying on your screens. Could I ask for anybody who hasn't received this document to indicate that they haven't received it? Okay, nobody's indicating they haven't received this document. Excellent. And of course, it's this document that sets out the technicalities of using Zoom in a very user-friendly manner. So grateful for indication people have had regard to that document. The second document is the Licensing Subcommittee Procedure document. And again, I'm just going to show the front page of that document so that we can check everybody has it. So does everybody have a document that says Virtual Council Subcommittee Procedure? I'm grateful for the nods. Does anyone wish to indicate they haven't received that document? No, nobody is indicating they haven't received it. Excellent. The third document is the report pack itself. And I'm now going to share that document to make sure everybody has the relevant report pack. This is the first of 2 report packs, and it begins public report. Has anyone not received this report pack of some 31 pages? No? Excellent. And finally, the fourth and final document is the supplementary report. And that is a much shorter document of some 4 pages in length. And again, I will just share that document. So you should now be seeing a 4-page document that begins with supplementary public report. Anybody wish to indicate they haven't received that document? Excellent. Well, that that deals with the matter of documentary housekeeping. And I'm glad that everybody has received the relevant documentation. And again, I remind you to keep that easily available during the progress of the meeting. Just a few points of order. I've explained already the importance of staying on mute. There will be a point in the proceedings where the legal advisor and the committee members adjourn to consider their decision. They will be placed in a separate virtual breakout room, and I will explain in more detail how that will work when we get to that stage. And if I could ask people to remain, to keep their cameras on, unless you're told to turn them off for any particular reason by me. Thank you. That deals with the preliminary matters of housekeeping and using Zoom. It therefore falls to me as the licensing officer to introduce this application, and I will do so very briefly. This is an application for a premises license in respect of premises known as Shop on Town Street, and representations have been received both from the police and from 3 local residents. The application was for a premises license which seeks to permit the sale of alcohol for consumption off premises to operate 24/7 and to remain open to the public 24/7. The applicant was Mr. David Geezer, and the committee will be assisted by the representations from the police and the further set of representations from the police that are a response to questions raised by the council, and that those the second set of matters raised by the police are found in the supplementary bundle. The site location plan is at Appendix 4 of the main bundle report pack, and there are essentially 4 options open to members today. The first would be to grant the license in accordance with the application. The second would be to reject the application. The third would be to grant the license subject to conditions, modified as appropriate. There would also be an option to exclude from the license any of the licensable activities, here the sale of alcohol, to which the application relates. And finally, they could refuse to specify a person in the license as the premises supervisor. I propose to leave it there and to invite counsel for the applicant to set out her case. Thank you. I'm now going to turn myself on mute.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the council for convening this very helpful hearing today. That's much appreciated. I appear on behalf of Mr. Geezer, and this is an application exactly as you've heard for a new licence. It's for 24 hours, and it's in relation to the sale of alcohol, but not just any alcohol. This is not a budget end proposal. This is for higher priced, higher quality alcoholic products, specialising in imported wines and spirits. I will be dealing with the representations that have been made in a moment from the police and also the residents, but it's encouraging to note from one of the resident representations that there is clearly a market for these types of products, and that is what Mr. Geezer wishes to bring to this town. It's a carefully thought through application, taking into account the potential risks that might arise, and the conditions that are considered appropriate have been set out in the operating schedule. And I wonder if I might ask all concerned to turn to that operating schedule, which is at page 23 of the main bundle, and I can use that to illustrate my points. I wonder if the licensing officer is able to assist with share screen to bring up page 23 of the bundle so that we can see the operating schedule. That's very helpful indeed. Thank you. And you can see there the conditions proposed, which take into account all of the issues that might be raised by an application like this. I won't take time going through each and every one, but could I invite the councillors to look at those very carefully when reaching their decision?
Ms. Clover, if I could just ask you to just pause one moment, because I can see that Councillor Riley Smith has raised his hand.
Of
The
course.
councillor has a question. Thank you. Councillor.
Yes, thank you, host. I'm terribly sorry. I can't read that on my screen. It's very small for me. Is there any way it can be expanded, please?
Yes, councillor, there is a way of doing that. If you look to the very top of your screen,
Yes.
you should see a number of options. If you go to the drop-down menu to the right and click on it, you should see an option to expand your screen to various percentages.
Yes, thank you.
Are you there? Excellent.
Thank you.
And that will just be for you, councillor, so you can modify that as you wish.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, as you were, Ms. Clover, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. May I turn then, please, to the representation that's been made on behalf of the police by Sergeant Boss. And in it, he indicates that he's had multiple occasions to have encounters with the licence applicant and the designated premises supervisor, Mr. Sarandon. Now, the applicant, Mr. Geyser, is a reputable licensee in the town, and he has 3 takeaway restaurants in addition to this new proposal. One of the allegations raised by Sergeant Boss relates to illegal workers at one or more of these takeaways. It's not clear because the sergeant says that this is an investigation ongoing and he's unable to give much detail about it. I would ask the committee to take that with some caution. Without more evidence, there is a contention on behalf of Mr. Geyser that in fact these are false allegations, and I will explain a little more about that in a moment, but it's very difficult to reach a conclusion on those allegations by Sergeant Boss without more, and they are hotly contested. But I can confirm it would only be Mr. Geyser and his wife and the designated premises supervisor, Mr. Sarandon, who would be working at the new proposed premises. The other allegations set out by Sergeant Boss relate to convictions of Mr. Geyser under the food safety regulations. So may I just deal with that, please? In relation to one of the takeaways, 131 Chip Alley, there was a conviction for a number of matters for Mr. Geyser in 2017. Now, that related to an episode of food poisoning that arose at Chip Alley, unfortunately, under the auspices of a particular manager who had failed to comply with various hygiene provisions, hence the convictions. Those systems were remedied. The manager was sacked. There have been no issues since, and that was 2017. At 12 Spice Street, where further convictions arose, the issue there was an infestation of mice, a rodent outbreak, and the contentions related to failure to block up holes and some hygiene maintenance issues. Nobody became ill as a result of that matter. That manager was also sacked, and there have been no issues since. The 2 sacked managers did have grievances with Mr. Geyser, and they are the ones that have raised the allegations, which Mr. Geyser maintains are false, about the illegal workers. Allegations are made about Mr. Sarandon as a designated premises supervisor at Sambuca Sally's, a nightclub that was closed on review in 2017. 2 assaults that took place in 2016 were the cause of that review and that revocation. They took place in the last months of 2016. Mr. Sarandon was the designated premises supervisor, but the faults were those of the security staff, in direct contradiction of the training that Mr. Sarandon had given to them. And so Mr. Sarandon is still a suitable and a reputable designated premises supervisor for this new project. May I turn then in brief conclusion to the concerns of the residents. Now, whilst we always pay close attention to the concerns of local people and residents who live near to the new proposal, these will be found when the council look at it to be unfounded. The police do not raise similar concerns about youths in the parks and the locality causing antisocial behaviour, and one would expect key problems like this to be noted by the police if they were a major problem in the area. There is no other shop on Town Street that will be opening at these hours that are a part of this proposal, it's not quite clear where it is that the residents are saying that youths currently get their alcohol from, but the appropriate approach, of course, is to deal with those premises that are selling to the underage, rather than refusing this application, which will be well managed and will not give rise to those sorts of problems. And finally, a concern about noise, particularly in terms of additional hours and from deliveries. Deliveries would not be taking place during sensitive hours, and that could be conditioned if required. This is intended to be a facility for local shoppers. There'll be an element of convenience use to it as well, particularly perhaps for shift workers, especially perhaps at this difficult time for NHS workers. And it's not anticipated there will be high footfall at sensitive hours, and so noise is not anticipated to be a significant issue. Those are the representations that I would like to make at this stage on behalf of Mr. Geezer, unless I can be of any assistance to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dover. Now is the opportunity for any questions from councillors.
Yes, thank you. I have a question, as indicated to you before the meeting took place. One of the points raised in the council's request for further information in the supplemental pack is what Mr. Sarandon had been up to since the 2016 assaults that we've heard about that occurred at Sambuca Sallies. And I was wondering, could Ms. Clover please clarify whether Mr. Sarandon has been involved in the operation of any other licensed premises over the past 4 years? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question and for the advance notification of it. I can tell you that Mr. Sarandon has still been employed in the hospitality industry, but not in this country. He has most recently been employed in other countries in a similar type of work, but he has not been a designated premises supervisor or managing premises in this country since that time. He has returned to England at this time to work with Mr. Geezer.
Thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Clover? I'm getting a shaking of heads, and so I believe we now turn to Sergeant Boss for his representations.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And akin to my learned friend, I'd just like to extend my thanks to the committee for their willingness to hold this hearing by remote means. It is very much appreciated. I'm also grateful to the committee for their request for further information in advance of this hearing, and perhaps if I could just confirm what I set out in my response to that. The police are of the view that there are not any conditions that would overcome our concerns, and our position remains before this committee that the licence should not be granted. If I could also ask the licensing officer to assist by bringing up the second document which I submitted, which is the final page of your supplementary report pack. And this should be a memorandum of conviction. And so councillors, in response to your queries about what was the nature of the convictions received by Mr. Geezer previously, they're set out there in that document, and we can see that they relate to contraventions of the Food Safety and Hygiene England regulations, a matter which I'll return to shortly. Councillors, the position of the police can be summarised as this. We do not have faith that the applicant and the DPS are fit to hold a 24/7 hour licence of this nature. And we therefore do not support this application and would ask you to refuse it. It's been asserted on behalf of the applicant that he is a reputable licence holder, and that is a submission that we would vehemently oppose. The reasons for our opposition to that statement, and indeed to this application, are the licensing history of both the applicant and Mr. Sarandon, the proposed DPS. If I could start first of all with the applicant himself, Mr. Geezer, I think it only right that I accept on behalf of the police that we cannot provide to you today further evidence relating to the immigration matters that I've highlighted in my submission. All I can say in relation to that is that there are investigations ongoing. Those investigations relate to illegal working and are therefore being led by the Home Office Immigration Enforcement Department, but those investigations are being supported by the police and we are offering assistance where we can. In relation to the health and safety offences, I think there's a number of points that arise from these. First of all, again, it's right for me to accept that there is no application here for late night refreshment, so the same issues don't necessarily arise in the same way. However, what those convictions demonstrate is a failure to have regard to the promotion of public safety, which is one of the licensing objectives and is therefore engaged here. This applicant has a failure demonstrated by those convictions to act in the best interest of public safety. I think what's particularly concerning about those convictions is the relatively short space of time that passed between the two sets of convictions. What we say that demonstrates is a failure by this applicant to manage his premises properly. Once he'd been convicted of those first set of offences, one would have thought the appropriate thing to do would review staffing and procedures at all of his premises to ensure that similar offences didn't occur at them. Clearly that did not happen, and he was prosecuted for further offences within a relatively short space of time. The blame seems to be laid at the fault of the managers of those individual premises. However, as the licence holder, ultimate responsibility for management falls in the applicant's lap, and he's therefore demonstrated his inability to manage his premises properly. If I move on to Mr. Sarandon, what his history demonstrates is that you councillors can't be sure that he can properly support this applicant, an applicant who we would say is clearly somebody who needs an extensive amount of support given his licensing history. The events that occurred at Sambuca Salad were so serious that a licence committee saw fit to revoke the licence for that premises. They didn't simply take steps to remove the DPS or impose further conditions. It was a revocation. Now, in both of the incidents that are identified, there were failings by the door staff at the premises. Now, whether or not the door staff do what they're told, that is ultimately, again, a question of management. And the fact that there were repeat incidents involving door staff or failures by door staff demonstrates that the DPS there wasn't able to do his job and manage them properly. Councillors, to wrap that up, what we therefore have is two individuals who have a proven track record of failing to manage licensed premises properly. And we say that the only logical conclusion you can reach as a result of that is that these individuals cannot properly promote the licensing objectives. And for those reasons, we would ask you to refuse the application. Thank you, councillors.
Anything arising out of Sergeant Boss's representations? I can see that Ms. Clover's raised a hand to indicate she wishes to say something. I don't know if the legal advisor has any advice about procedure at this point.
Just comments. Obviously, the default position is that we don't have cross-examination without permission. So if it's a comment or a point of clarification, please do so.
Well, through the chair and with permission, therefore, it's not cross-examination. I would seek a point of clarification from Sergeant Boss, if possible. And I wanted to ask for confirmation that the allegations about illegal workers have indeed come from the two managers in question, in line with my contention that they're mischievous allegations, but can the officer confirm that is where the allegations have come from?
Councillors, all I can confirm is that this is an ongoing investigation, and in light of that, we can't comment further on it at this stage.
Thank you, Sergeant Boss. If there's nothing further by way of clarification, then we now will turn to Mr. Williams, who is the residents' spokesperson.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Good, please let me know. Well, I'll keep this relatively brief, councillors, because I'm here to represent the interests of the three residents and their families who made representations, and I know you've read those. I can keep it brief because I'm not sure the residents could add a great deal more to that Sergeant Boss has said. The residents were very alarmed to hear about what I will describe as a somewhat murky history to this applicant and those associated. That frankly terrifies these residents, who are already suffering at the hands of antisocial behaviour in the park. I hear what Miss Clover said about that being matters that haven't come to the attention of the police. But the reality is that the residents live and breathe the area. They know what is going on. You'll see from the map that their residences are near to the park. And it's without doubt correct that there are youths there causing noise and nuisance without perhaps causing what some would describe as serious criminal offences. And again, we hear what Miss Clover says about it not being possible to say where they are already getting their alcohol. But what we say to that is this: it will be absolutely clear where they will be getting their alcohol should you grant this application. Because should you grant this application, this will be the only premises open after 11 p.m. I'd also want to say just one other brief thing. And we feel, the residents feel, that it's not right to simply say, well, we're offering high-end alcohol, so we're targeting a certain clientele. They're still going to be selling the low-end alcohol, and plainly that is what the average Joe will want to drink, something cheap and cheerful. And we would say, despite one resident very frankly saying, well, look, that would interest me, it would interest them during normal hours. But that resident, and we suggest very few patrons, would suddenly get the urge to buy high-end imported wine at 3 a.m. And so it would be our submission, along with the police, that this application should simply be refused. We don't see that there's any way to mitigate when you've got, frankly, some individuals who don't follow law, don't follow regulation. Unless I can assist any further, those are our representations.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. No one's indicated there's anything arising out of what Mr. Williams has set out. And so it now falls to me to invite Ms. Clover to summarise the position of the applicant.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I'll take care not to repeat matters that I've already stated and simply to deal with the representations that have been made in the course of this hearing. Mr. Williams, on behalf of the residents, appears to have changed positions somewhat. I was not aware of any mention in the written representations from the residents of any anxiety or concern about any murky past on behalf of Mr. Geezer and Mr. Sarand, and the concerns appeared to come from matters in situ in this locality from the youths in the park. I do maintain on behalf of Mr. Geezer that the products that will be on offer under this licence will not be of a type or a price attractive to inappropriate drinkers, particularly the underage. They will not be attracted to these premises and would not be enabled to purchase those products there because of the conditions in any event. In response to the point about who wants to buy alcohol at 3 o'clock in the morning, well, of course, not everybody maintains what might be described as normal working hours, and I refer specifically to shift workers who may be coming home and buying a basket of goods on their way. In relation to Sergeant Boss, I would simply say this: the allegations that are heavily placed before you are past allegations. Some of them in relation to the illegal workers are hotly disputed, and the evidence before you is inadequate to make conclusions on those. They are in any event dissimilar in nature to anything that could arise at these premises. It's not clear how such food safety concerns could be replicated in these current premises, but perhaps the most important point is that these premises, this licensee rather, has seen years, and I emphasise years, of blame-free trading at his 3 takeaways. He does not have a track record of poor performance or poor trading, quite the reverse. The last 3 years have been without criticism. And so to commend this application to you, these are difficult times. Local businesses should be supported wherever possible in accordance with the 4 licensing objectives. We need to present positive business models. There is a market for this license application, and under all the circumstances with the safeguards in place, noting of course that it could always be revisited on review I do commend this application to the committee, unless I can help you any further.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clover. I believe that brings the representations to a close. I'd like to thank everybody for their contribution. What will now happen is that I will create a separate breakout room for the 3 councillors and the legal advisor, where they can retire to consider their decision. If you're not a councillor or the legal advisor, if I could ask you just to remain in this main room at the present on mute, and I will shortly, I hope, be able to confirm that I've successfully transferred the councillors and their advisor to a separate room. So perhaps if you could just bear with me whilst I do that. Thank you. Excellent. Well, I can see that the breakout room has been successfully created, and the councillors have now retired to consider their decision, assisted by the legal advisor. So I would invite all parties at this point to turn their cameras off and leave themselves on mute, and to rejoin the proceedings in some 15 minutes time, please, which by my watch means that it will be 2:45. And if you could indicate, please, that you have returned to the proceedings by turning your camera on so that I can see that you have returned. At that point, I will check to see if a decision has been reached and advise further. So I'm now going to turn myself on mute, turn my camera off, and I will see everybody here in 1/4 hour. Thank you. Well, thank you for rejoining me. It's now 2:45, and I understand that the decision making in the breakout room has come to a conclusion. So I'm now going to ask the 3 councillors and the advisor to rejoin us. So if you could just remain on mute, please, and wait whilst I do that. Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to advise that we've now been rejoined by the 3 councillors and the legal advisor, who've previously indicated to me that a decision has been made. So perhaps if I could now invite them to advise us of the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bell. The councillor has asked me to indicate the outline of their decision, which is the application is going to be refused, and there will be written reasons setting out the details within the next 5 working days. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation. That brings these proceedings to a close. And so if I could invite you to leave this meeting and log off. Thank you very much.